Hello, everyone. I'm Carla Fraser from the Career Expat by Rosappa Global. And today I'm going to spend a moment talking about the words global mobility. We hear this word all the time. And I just want to spend a moment just talking about what it is, what you should think about when you think about the words global mobility, what does it entail, and go from there. So let's start with some kind of more of a technical type of definition. And so global mobility is really about the strategy and processes that organizations use to move their employees from one country to another, from one work assignment to another. It's about managing the issues, logistics, and making sure they're complying with the international laws and practices of the countries they're moving their employees from and to. And that's very, practical terms about what global mobility is. So let me take that from my stance. When I think about global mobility, while I wholeheartedly agree with the definition, to put it in more common terms, it's really about, do I work for an organization, name your company, and that company is moving me to name a different country than you're in right now. And so it's typically in the space of being an expat. So you're moving from one country to another, from one work assignment to another. It could be a long-term project, it could be a short-term project. It could be within the corporate sector, it could be within the governmental sector. And so think embassy, think multinational companies, even think the military. That's where global mobility comes in. The other piece that is not talked about as much in global mobility is what's called the self-generated global mobility, meaning that I'm an individual who works in a company, but I leave my company to work at another company, a different company in another country. So that's also global mobility. So there's different variations on global mobility. Some of it's your company moving you. Some of it's you as an individual self-initiating your move from one organization to another, from one country to another. And that all lands within the global mobility context. So just remember, it's multifaceted. And as you are in the expat realm, because that's typically where global mobility really connects to, you're thinking about, the employment factor. So you're using your expertise, you're using your skills. Those skills are mobile. They're transferable skills. You're going from, being an accountant in one country to being an accountant in another country. You are going from being, in my case specifically, being in higher education in one country to being in higher education in another country. You could do things that are more, what I call it, tangential or related. So you could go from, let's say, being a nurse in one country to being a traveling nurse in another country. Or a training nurse in another country. So you're not really practicing, but you're in a space of teaching or training. So again, mobility can look like different things in your career. It can look like different locations. Mobility can be from, one place in Europe, one country in Europe to another, going from Germany to Switzerland. It can look like going from Singapore to Argentina. It can look like going from, South Africa to Egypt. So it varies where you're going and how you're going and who's doing the going and who's taking care of the bills, paying for the going in some cases. So just wanting to make sure that we're thinking about global mobility in both broad sense and a little bit more narrow sense. So In that case, now that I've kind of spent a little bit of time kind of defining it, giving a little bit of examples, having you think about global mobility and is it something that you're either currently doing or you want to do, let's answer a couple of questions that may be helpful in teasing out your thoughts a bit more. The challenges that happen in global mobility could be managing the culture, um, managing the requirements of living and moving to that new country, making sure that your organization is managing the labor laws, managing immigration, and then just the plain logistics of moving. Moving can be easy for some folks, moving can be challenging. Sometimes it's a move with just your suitcase, sometimes it's a move with a 20-foot container. Um, so those are some of the natural challenges that come with global mobility. It's just making sure that compliance is happening. And that's just compliance across the board. And so that they think is really important to pay attention to as challenges that you may experience. Compensation is always an area that expats are pay keen attention to as part of the global mobility and process. And so when you think about compensation, you're thinking about things such as not just salary, but the cost of living, housing, any allowances that you may get as part of your compensation. Things that may be common in some places are education allowances if you have children, car allowances for your transportation, telecommunication allowances for phones or internet at home. Companies will have different packages for different people at different levels. So a manager may get one package that may include allowances at one level, whereas an executive director may get a package that includes more allowances. So those are just things to think about when you think about compensation. So it's usually have what's called a base salary, and then you have your allowances on top of your base salary that takes care of your living needs, essentially. So that could be, for example, with housing. So in some cases, your company may provide you the housing, or in other cases, they may give you an allowance, a cash as part of your paycheck to then pay for housing. They may take you out to go shopping for your housing, and they may sign the contract and they take care of everything, or they may say, we'll take you to look for housing, you select it, we will give you the money, and you have to work through making sure your payments get happen. Sometimes compensation is paid in local salary. Sometimes compensation is paid in the salary of the company, now they're the company's headquarters. For example, if the company is headquartered in the US, your salary could be paid in USD. The company could be paid, your salary could be paid in Europe if it's headquartered in the EU, in euros, if it's headquartered in the EU sector. Or there could be laws and regulations that say your salary has to be paid in local currency, but it's the equivalent of, let's say, USD or euros. So again, compensation has a variety of different things to be to consider. So it's the base, it's the allowances, the currency it's paid in, are all things that you need to be thinking about, asking about during job interviews in order to make sure that you're being compensated well for the position you're transitioning into. So the other piece that really comes to be important is cultural differences and managing your cultural adjustment in any country. As someone who's moved to 7 different countries for living and working, I've had to navigate 7 different cultures. And sometimes things may be similar, but they're different. Let me give you an example. I've lived in 4 Islamic-based countries, but the culture in regards to Islam in each country is different. Some are more conservative and some are, I wouldn't say liberal, but some are really within the standard Islamic context. And so while I've lived in one country, I can't take the same context into the next country. And so you also have to pay attention to where you're coming from. Where have you lived and what country you're going into? What are the cultural norms there that you need to be paying attention to? If you're used to tipping at the end of a service in the US or North America or other, some place in Latin America, well, if you're moving to Japan, that's not a thing. And you need to be able to be aware of that, whether you're traveling or you're planning to live there. Realizing what may be offensive in a culture, and especially if you're going to be living there and you're living within the local community, even if that means the local expat community, but also the local base community, it's understanding how you're going to not just adjust, but integrate into the place that you're going to be living for 3 years, 3 months, maybe even longer or shorter. And so those things are truly important and crucial because it affects how you do business. If you are representing your company, going to business meetings, supervising staff, all of these things fall into understanding cultural differences and cultural context. And one of the things I will say is I've written an article about cultural differences in the workplace that you can find on my blog on medium.com. I'll drop the link in the notes so that you can find that article. So you can kind of take a sense and understand a little bit of cultural context in the workplace. But for anyone who's new that's going abroad, I also have a course where I talk about in the course adjusting, coping and adjusting abroad. What are the things you need to prepare for as you're getting on the plane to any country? In order to start that a smooth adjustment. It is important that you pay attention to what your family are doing. How are you adjusting into schools? How are the kids adjusting to schools? How are your partner or spouse adjusting to working or not working? How are you adjusting into the company's culture? I know one of the things for me in Singapore is that there's a culture of you do some socialization after work with your colleagues, and particularly around special occasions, whether it's Chinese New Year or whether it's National Day, whether it's someone's birthday, you may be going out after work for a drink. And sometimes your partner may or may not be joining you. So understanding some of the social norms that go with the work culture is also important in cultural adjusting. Language. If you do not know the language, are you going to learn the language? Are your children going to learn the language? Is it important for you to learn the language in order to fully function within the society? So I think that those are all pieces. Local foods, attending local cultural events, attending local celebrations. These are all things that help you really dive into and make the new place, your new country, and your new work environment a good match for you. Last but not least on answering questions. So what are the trends that are happening? Well, there's plenty of trends happening in global mobility these days. The two biggest ones are definitely remote work and hybrid work coming out of the most recent years. But global mobility still has some of that traditional going on where you're packing up and you're moving from one assignment to the other. But there has been some flexibility that's been built into the system with the remote or the hybrid function. I think it's important to understand what your company wants. If you are doing a company transfer, an intercompany transfer to a different country, or you're doing a self-initiated move from one company to another from one country to another, understanding what that company or organization needs, understanding the current strategies for being more inclusive that the organization is presented. Does that fit your needs? Does that fit the needs of your family? So becoming aware of some of the uh, diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces that are happening globally. Some of that includes nationalization. And so there are positions that are for nationals only, or the fact that you could be in a role that becomes nationalized, and part of your job is to teach the nationals how to do your role. So just realize that there's a lot of different trends that are happening in the global space right now, and that you should be prepared to navigate your way through them. With all of that being said, let's now talk about, are you ready to become an expat? Are you ready to be a career expat? And how can you get that started? You now understand a little bit about global mobility, and that is an option for you, more so than you thought before, or I just reconfirmed what you thought, and you're ready, like, okay, I need some help in navigating this global mobility piece, and what are my next steps? So I'm here to help you. So three things that we can do. One is you can read some of the articles that I've written and get yourself some additional knowledge. And again, you can find those on medium.com, Rosappa Global. Link will be in the message. Two, get on a call with me. Let's explore what are your options from a career standpoint, and see if there are ways to get you on an international path and get you globally mobile. And then the third one is, if you are already there, if you are ready to get on a plane, you're ready to move from one country to the other, you need some resources for yourself or your family to be able to manage cultural adjustment or what you need to be thinking about, then hop on our website, thecareerexpat.com, and use our course. It's a self-paced course with modules and resource tools. It's called Adjusting and Coping Living Abroad, to help you and or you and your family to start to think about the cultural adjustment process and integration process. So thank you all. It was great talking about global mobility with you today, and signing off, The Career Expat by Rosappa Global, and I'm Carla Fraser.